Doomguy Wants It, by Morton Joe. Doomguy gets angry. He stood at the edge of a red, glistening portal. In his right hand he clutched the most important thing in his life, his pet Daisy's head. In his other hand, he held the second dearest thing, his machine gun. He glanced up at the portal. He didn't know what was behind it, nor did he care. Anything could be behind that gate, a new world, Earth, shit, he could even end up back in hell. But that didn't bother him. Hardly anything ever bothered him, save for the death of his favorite pet rabbit. Fucking imps got him when his back was turned. Releasing an audible sigh, he attached Daisy to his belt. He gazed into the portal. Furrowing his brow, he took his first step into the red gate. Once his head passed through, the entire world went black. He laid face first in a bush with his ass sticking in the air. Around him he could hear the sounds of chirping birds and a group of little kids who were playing with a beach ball not too far away. Pushing himself out of the bush, he shook the leaves off his helmet. He reached for his gun, only to stop when he realized that it wasn't strapped to his back. He began to panic, but as quickly as it came, it settled when he noticed that it was only laying a few feet away from him. He picked it up and brushed the leaves and dirt off of it. Using the back of his glove, he smiled at the shininess of it once he was finished. "Pop. Hi, girl," said a creepy, almost pedophile-like voice. His vision shot from his gun and over the bush towards the playing. Wait a second, those aren't children. At least they didn't look like ordinary kids. Instead, looked more like tiny, colorful horses, except one had wings, and the other had a tiny, almost laughable, spike jutting out of its head. "Oh hi, Twilight," said the small vanilla-colored horse, as she slowly leaned away. "How's it going?" The purple horse spun to face the young little thing. "Great. Just great," she said as sweat dripped from her forehead, her left eye twitching. He raised an eyebrow. He knew for a fact that this horse thing's day was not going good. With the way her mane was, and her comical shrunken eyes, he knew she hadn't slept at all. Out of all the fucked up demons he killed, and all the horrible situations he had gotten out of, this small, colorful horse was actually kind of creepy. The horse began to approach the three little ones. "You three look like you're being great too." "Well, not with you acting that way, they aren't." She made her way between the three of them. "Looks like three good friends who obviously don't need the help of." She stepped in front of the orange bird horse. "Another good friend," she half shouted as she brought her face so close to the point that hers was almost touching the little kid's nose. He stepped back, his eyes wide. What the fuck was wrong with this creature? Doesn't she obviously know that the others don't like her being around them? Maybe he should do something, go down, maybe rough up the purple one a bit. Teach her not to get super fucking close to little kids, maybe even threaten to tell the authorities. He glanced up and saw that the horse pulled the small doll out of nowhere. "This is Smarty Pants," she said as she nuzzled it. "She was mine when I was your age." The three kids huddled together, trying their best to get as far away from the purple one as they can. Purple levitated the doll in front of the little ones and shouted, "And I want to give her to you." The three younglings stared at the doll. They'd just gone through hell and back with confusion. Started the orange bird thing. "She's a great." She obviously lied as she shared a look with her friends. "Yeah," said the vanilla horse with hardly any enthusiasm. "Great." Marshmallow brought a hoof up to her chin. "I really like her mane." Her voice cracked. He shrugged. "At least she tried, but in all honesty, that doll looks like shit." He swung his machine gun over his shoulder. Stretching his back out, he got ready to move on. But before he could walk off, he decided to take one last glance at the potential rape scene. The purple one was sitting down, with a hoof across her chest. "I really hope the fact that there are three of you, and only one of her, doesn't become a problem." The pitch of her voice was rising as she spoke. Lowering her head, she began to murmur something to herself. Okay, he's seen enough. It was time to get moving. He stretched his legs and cracked his neck. As he turned away, he noticed the three kids fighting as they tried to get away. Maybe he could notify the horse police or something, maybe call some jockeys or something. He smirked at the thought. Stepping over the bush, he began to, "Holy shit. Hearts," He could see small tiny cartoon hearts going into the shit no beautiful so marvelous doll. He shook his head. Why was he attracted to it? It was as if he, for some reason, wanted it. Oh, Jesus, why does he want to snuggle with it? I want it, shouted the orange one. I need it, said the vanilla one. I really like her mane, squeaked Marshmallow. He'll kill for that fucking adorable piece of shit. He pounded his right fist into the palm of his left hand. He then cracked his knuckles and charged as fast as he could towards the now fighting kids. Springing out from the bushes, he dove into the fray, grabbing Marshmallow by the right hoof. He threw her into a nearby bush, holding Vanilla away with his left hand, while using the doll in a tug-of-war match with the bird horse thing. However, this didn't even prove to be a challenge, since the bird horse was dangling off the ground, flapping her pathetic wings at an alarming rate. Twilight stared wide-eyed at the spontaneous mosh pit. She shook her head, and decided to go along with her original plan. She stepped forward. Okay, break it up, she said, her once crazed appearance completely gone in the dark. I believe there is an important lesson that can be learned. Releasing his death clutch from the vanilla horse's face, he cocked his left arm back, and floored the purple horse in the face, which caused her to fly back a few feet. Twilight stumbled back onto her hooves, rubbing her snout. She sighed. Hey, come on. Aren't we all friends? Her horn flared with magic, and in a single blink she was on the other side of the view. Sweetie Belle, who was still in the bush, sat up straight and shook the leaves out from her mane. She glanced up at the tall creature, who was fending off her pleb bloomin' Scootaloo. Sweetie climbed onto her hooves, and charged the giant masculine monstrosity. She then jumped into the air, and latched onto its shoulders. Come on guys, don't you think we should share? Twilight asked as she tried her best to fix her mistake. No way. A plebloom muffled into his hand. He shook his back, trying to fling the small marshmallow creature off him. Though, he could have just fell backwards and crushed the poor thing. However, that would require letting go of his adorable new toy. The four of them flustered Twilight. She released an irritated groan. Twilight then got into a pounce position, and dove into the pit. She rammed into his side, causing him to stumble back, and fall onto his side, which caused him to let go of his prized possession. His eyes widened in fear as the small orange filly took hold of it, but before she could run off she was tackled to the ground by the other two fillies. He got up off the ground, looking over at the small purple unicorn. He took her by the throat, and threw her to the side. Twilight spun as she flew, only to end up smacking, back first, into Big Macintosh. Oh thank goodness, Big Macintosh. Twilight groaned and straightened herself out. You gotta help me get that. A loud bang erupted from the pit as a pink object whizzed past Twilight's head. Milliseconds later, a large smoldering hole had formed in a nearby tree. Twilight's eyes widened, and her pupils shrunk. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw that he had his machine gun out. But luckily, before he fired, one of the fillies must have pushed his arm to the side by accident. Twilight faced Big Mac again. Yup, is all he said, as if he knew what Twilight was going to ask. He pushed past Twilight, and made his way over to the tall creature, who was triumphantly wielding the doll, as if he had just won an Olympic medal. He smiled as he dangled the doll over the fillies' heads, like what an owner would do when playing with his cat. The fillies jumped in the air, attempting to latch onto it with their teeth, while Marshmallow over there tried to use her majesty stuff to get it. He turned away from the fillies, finally deciding that he had enough of them, but before he could take his first step, he felt something snag onto his snuggly pants. His head instantly snapped towards whoever grabbed. His brows furrowed, and boy, if he could shoot lasers, man, fucking everything would be on fire right now. A large red stallion took the toy, and yanked it out of his hand. The stallion then turned away from him, and went back over to the purple horse. But before she could thank him, he took off. He clenched his fists together, his nostrils flared, causing his visor to blur a bit. Pounding his fist together, he shook his head disappointingly. There's no holding back now. Nobody takes Daisy 2.0 from him, and gets away with it. He sprinted towards the horse, but to his avail it was just too fast for him to keep up with. Behind him he could hear the shouts of other horses behind. He took a quick glance over his shoulder. Behind him came about a dozen more horses, and horse-bird-like creatures, their eyes all filled with the look of love for the doll. One by the one they ran and flew past him, and as more came by the angrier he got. Maybe it was time he slowed things down a bit. He grabbed hold of his machine gun, he rose it up and took aim. He then gently squeezed the trigger. A loud bang erupted from the gun and the bullet soared through the air like an eagle with nitrous coming out its ass. The bullet punctured a mint green horse's leg, causing it to go head over heels. He smiled and aimed at the next. Just like before, he fired another round, sadly, though he missed his target. He took his gaze forward. In front of him was a large crowd of horses, all of them piling on top of each other like ants. He pushed forward even faster. He jumped forward and landed on the back of one of the horses. Reaching upwards, he grabbed onto the mane of a brown horse that had an hourglass for a tattoo on his ass. He used the mane as a rope as he pulled himself up the massive dog pile of horses. Through his feet he could feel the mosh pit raging below him the farther he went. Once he reached the top of the mountain of equines, he noticed the red one, who was still flinging the doll around in his disgusting slobbery mouth. The red one craned his head to the side when he noticed him. Before the stallion could react, though, he smashed the butt of his gun into his face, knocking him out instantly. The stallion dropped the toy, but before any other horse could take it, he lunged out and snagged it with the left hand. Placing his right foot on one of the horse's faces, he pushed himself on top of the mount. He stood up and gazed down at the kind of colorful yet horrific sight. He raised his gun once more and pulled the trigger. The gun clicked. He pulled the trigger again. It clicked again. He did it again. It clicked again. Before he could try anything else, a beam of magic came out of nowhere and struck his gun out of his hand. Startled by the random act, he turned to face his random opponent. Below the pile crawled the same mint green horse he shot earlier. Despite her love-filled eyes, she seemed rather angry. He snarled. Diving off the crowd, he landed before Minty. Taking a few steps forward, he strapped AZ 2.0 to his belt. Behind him the crowd still raged, not even knowing that he just left. He hunched forward and clutched Minty by the horn. He lifted her off the ground so that he was staring her straight in the eyes. "Give me that doll, human," she growled. The unicorn lashed out with her right hoof, but he caught it with his left hand. Before she could attack him with her left hoof, he tossed her aside just like the others. Behind him a cotton candy-colored horse tackled him. He stumbled forward with his arms outstretched. He caught himself, but before he could stand up, the horse kicked him in the side, which sent him to the ground. The horse stood on her hind legs, getting ready to bombard him with kicks. He rolled out of the way right as her hooves slammed into the dirt. Quickly climbing to his feet, he lunged at her with his arm outstretched. His arm smashed into her right eye, which sent her barrel rolling in the opposite direction. Noticing that she wasn't going to get back up, he stood up straight. He reached down towards his belt and took Daisy 2.0 in his hand. Stroking her beautiful mane, he began walking up the hill where the only 6 unaffected horses laid in shock. He smiled at his new prize. He finally found her. He finally found the suitable replacement for his rabbit, and all he had to do is take it from a few stupid horses. All the fun they're going to have when they get home. Maybe he'll take her to the park or even give her a bath. All the wonders they would endure, the adventures they'll have. Twilight sparkle. He glanced up and saw a larger horse-bird thing, but this time it had a horn coming out of its head. Surrounding it was a bright aura which didn't really bother him, since he was still wearing his marine helmet. He shrugged and continued up the hill, stroking his new pet. Now where was he? Oh yeah. A bright light engulfed everything around him, which caused him to stop in his tracks. Once the light dissipated, he became confused. He checked his surroundings. What the fuck? Where was he? Why is he in a fucking field in the middle of twilight? What the fuck is that white horse thing with candy-colored hair, which seems to be flowing magically? Why are all these creatures staring at him? Where's his gun? Why is he holding a toy? Is he high? Then it dawned on him. It dawned on him real hard, and I mean really hard. His head slowly shifted its way towards the purple unicorn. She did this. She drugged him. The 7 ponies raised an eyebrow at the sight of the now witching creature. Is it all right? Applejack asked Twilight, who stood there with a guilty look strung across her face. What exactly is it? Rainbow Dash asked as she hovered in place with her forelegs crossed. His eyes twitched as his entire conscience was consumed by pure anger, the same exact anger he succumbed to the day he found Daisy's head on that stake. He became so angry that his body began to shake uncontrollably. Grabbing the toy by the neck, he tore its head off, which elicited a surprised gasp from the 7 horses. A wicked smile pierced his lips. In an instant he began to rip the toy to pieces at an immense speed. Within seconds the toy once known as Smarty Pants was now a pile of stuffing. He scooped the stuffing up off the dirty ground and chucked it at Twilight. The stuffing smacked her in the face, causing her to stumble back, and once she removed the stuffing she was greeted by a fist to the face. An explosion of pain surged throughout her entire body. Her vision was blinded by a cascade of stars. Next thing she knew, she laid on the ground gazing up at the stars. Dusting his armor off, he gave all the ponies double middle fingers, while he walked off into the sunset towards the town in the distance. Doomguy Hates Nightmare Night, by Morton Joe. Doomguy hates Nightmare Night. He made his way past the trees, and across the dirt road, brushing the leaves off his mud-stained armor, which used to be green. He released an audible groan as his stomach screamed for food and other refreshments. It's been exactly 28 days since he arrived in this bizarre world. It's been exactly 28 days since the Doll incident. Ever since that incident he's been hiding in the dark, avoiding countless patrols that Big White Horse bitch sent after him. He was a wanted man for causing mass havoc that wasn't his fault. Well, now that he thinks about it, he did punch that purple horse in the face, and then flicked them all off right in front of their leader. So yeah, it was kind of his own fault that he's now hiding in the dark, avoiding flying horse birds covered in plated armor. He could probably take them. Shit, he knows he can take them, but he'd rather not cause any more problems. His stomach grumbles again. He shakes his head and clutches his gut. He hasn't eaten in 3 days, and that grizzly bear he fucked up a while back was taken away from him by an even larger constellated bear. And without his gun, which he misses dearly, it makes finding food even harder. He took his helmet off and yawned, gazing up at the star-riddled sky. He breathed in the cool fall air and released a cloud of carbon dioxide. The stars did look beautiful tonight. Most of sky was clear, save for the occasional cloud or two. It was even surprising quiet out, and he liked that. It was different. And that's all he thought. It was different. He didn't need to peek around any corner or blast any imps in the face. All he needed to do is lay down in the grass and think of what he is going to eat. Crack-a-boom. He nearly jumped out of his armor. Diving forward, he hid behind a nearby tree. He wasn't scared. No, he never gets scared, just startled, that's all. Yeah, that's it, startled. Whatever that was, it had large weapon. Shit, why did Minty have to shoot his gun out of his hand? And why wasn't it there the next day, when he came back for it? Wahahaha. Oh, you should have seen the look on your face. Laughed a tomboyish girl. Oh, sweet Celestia, you looked like you're about to die. Wahahaha. Oh my sides, that was a good one, she giggled. He craned his head around the corner to get a look at this girl, and to his distaste he recognized this pony. Mare in black skin suit with rainbow mane sat on a black storm cloud laughing her ass off. Now he had no fucking idea on how she was sitting on that cloud, nor did he even give two shits. Matter of fact, all he was thinking right now is how the fuck is he going to rip her off that damn thing and shove her fucking wings down her throat. Maybe then she'll have something to laugh about. Wait a second, he doesn't think that makes any sense. Who gives a fuck? As long as he can get her back by the end of this, he doesn't care. The only problem is, how the hell is he going to get her down from there? He watched the rainbow mane bird horse fly off with her cloud. Once she was out of sight, he stepped out from his cover. He began to head off in the direction the Pegasus went in. While he followed her, he began to smile. Oh, he had an idea, a good one too. The thing is though, he's going to need some help, but that wouldn't be a problem, because he knows who he needs to find, and he's been around these parts before, so he knows where to look. His smile grew ear to ear, revealing his nice pearly whites. Oh, this is going to be perfect. He poked his head out from a bush just on the outskirts of the small village. He could see dozens of small horse kids roaming around with bags of candy strapped to their backs following another horse, which was dressed like a chicken. He watched with a curious eye as the group of kids followed the older chicken horse in the town as they periodically stopped at house to gather even more candy. His stomach groaned, he winced and his eyes shot down to his stomach, and then back up again. To his right he saw two more little horses heading up the trail, and back towards the town carrying two large bags of treats. "Man, I can't believe Granny Smith was giving away so much candy," the gray colt said happily as he snacked on a chocolate bar. "I know, right? She even gave me this Sprite stick," said the little girl as she tore the top off her pixie sticks. "You know what, that's enough stalling. He's hungry, time to snack on something." "Really? I haven't even seen one all night. You know I love those things," the colt complained. "You can have a little if you'd like." Snap. What was that? The colt's head spun around, so that it was looking back down the trail they just came. "What was what?" the filly asked, she too checking back. "Did you just hear that?" the colt asked, his voice starting to waver. "Well, I thought I heard something, but it might just be a raccoon or something," the filly trailed off into silence. "Hell, let's just head back into town," she said as she turned her head back around. "I don't like it out here." Falling onto the ground, her head snapped upwards, so that she was glaring straight into the eyes of 6-foot monster. "What is it? Holy crap." Same as the girl, the colt fell back onto his ass, a shock expression on his face as he stared into the eyes of cold-hearted killer. He glared down at the kids with a solemn expression. Raising his finger slowly like elderly man on his deathbed, he pointed his index finger at the bag of candy that lay on its side, spilling the contents onto the dirt. "You want the candy?" the girl asked. He nodded his head. She stumbled onto her feet. Bending down, she took a piece into her mouth and held it up for him to take. He raised an eyebrow. Taking the piece of candy, he held it up to his visor. His eyes widened in fear. Oh, the horror. Oh, the disgusting horror. Why did he even let that filthy creature wrap her gums around that plastic wrapper? There's no way in hell he'd ever put anything like this in his mouth. Flinging the sugary treat aside angrily, he bent down and took the both of their bags into his hands. "Hey, you can't steal that from us," the boy squeaked. "You know how hard we had to work for those." He cocked an eyebrow. "Work? What, walking up to somebody's front porch and saying trick or treat is work? That's if they even say trick or treat. For all he know, they have to walk over hot coals to earn just a single piece, or prank a blind man into walking into a busy street." He rolled his eyes. Reaching into bags, he produced 2 gumballs and tossed one to each of the 2 kids. With it, he brushed past each of them and began heading straight into the town. "A gumball? Seriously? I'm telling my brother on you." The boy climbed onto his feet and shot an angry look at the tall, striking creature. He glanced over his shoulder and gave the young colt a look he'd never forget. Turning away from him, he walked off towards the town. "Well, that was messed up," the girl said with a disturbed look. She waited for Rumble to reply, but when she didn't receive one, she looked at her friend with a concerned look. "Rumble, are you okay?" she asked him, but still he didn't reply. Instead, he stood there, his mouth hung open and his eyes wide with fear as he just stood there, staring into the distance, not even moving a single muscle. The filly waved her hoof in front of his face, but he didn't react. "Rumble, you're scaring me. What's going on?" Ponies looked at him with confused and disturbed looks. He took a quick glance over his shoulder, making sure not to look them in the eye too long. By the looks of it, none of them really seemed to have recognized him. At least, not yet. He shrugged his shoulders and readjusted the 2 large bags of candy he held in each of his hands. Well, that suits him, as long as those golden guard horses don't come raining down from the sky. Maybe he could enjoy himself a bit, you know, like eat some candy, maybe throw those little spider-looking things at that web just across from him. Looks like a stage. Maybe there's like a karaoke machine or something. Oh sweet, there's a bar just on the other side of the bar. Nightmare Minus gobbling pipsqueak. Everybody rolling. What the fuck? He yelled. My backside has been gobbled. What the fuck? 'Tis a lie. Guy backside is whole and ungobbled. Guy ungrateful whelp. Lightning flashed, followed by a crack of thunder. All around him everything fell silent. What the fuck? Did he miss something? His head shot back and forth trying to find out where the screaming and shouting is coming from. His eyes fell on one large blue horse similar to the tall white one with the ice cream mane, yet this one was slightly smaller and was a dark shade of blue. Fair villagers, please do not back away, the blue horse pleaded. Let us gather together, and she stopped to think. Fun, she gestured out with her hoof and smiled. He smiled. Yes, fun is good. He stood there waiting to see what this horse was going to do next. Apparently she hasn't noticed him, yet her head shot from the left then the right only to go down, when she noticed the small spider plushie on the ground. Picking it up in her teeth. Oh god, what else do these creatures put in their mouths? She dropped it into her hoof, and tossed it out to the crowd of shocked ponies. The toy landed with a squeak and the townsfolk glared at it not knowing what to do. Okay, he had to admit this isn't really fun. Not enough fun for you? The blue horse asked angrily. Well yeah, how is throwing a toy spider at a crowd supposed to be fun? Seriously, what do you expect them to do? Fight to the death over it, like he did with the toy 28 days ago? Well, at the time during his high it was fun, but afterwards when he realized he'd been drugged what say you took this? The horse fired a beam of electricity at the plush toy. Moments later the toy grew into a giant 8-legged tarantula that had 4 evil red eyes. Just only mere seconds later she fired another beam into a large basket full of them, creating a tiny army of evil tarantulas. The spiders crawled along the ground towards the giant web, save for a few that pounced on her poor pink pony. He turned away before he could anything else that happened to her. Hazza. How many points do I receive? The crazed horse asked as her eye twitched almost uncontrollably. Jesus man, she's almost as crazy as the purple horse that drugged him. He felt something crawling up his leg. Looking down he jumped back at the sight of one of the spiders crawling up his leg. Kicking his leg out, the spider lost its and flew in the air like, well, rock really, because seconds later it came back down hard and landed on the face of an orange pony that was dressed like a vampire. The pony screamed in fear as it began running blindly, causing a massive chain reaction of even more screams and panicking ponies. He took a step back towards a nearby alleyway, hoping that he doesn't attract too much attention. Out of the corner of his eye he noticed the blue princess raising a hoof as she slowly walked through the panicking crowd. Please do not run away, she said, furrowing her brow. As your princess we command you. Bitch, you started all of this, he thought as he crouched down behind a nearby barrel. Surrounding him he noticed the mass chaos that was wreaking havoc all around him. Horses that were too dumb to wash out where they were going crashed into each other or tripped over barrels of apples. Okay, it was kind of hard not to smile at that, but he couldn't help himself. After a few seconds he began to realize that this was starting to grow a bit ridiculous. Like seriously, one of them just ran into a stand face first and sent a massive, he doesn't even know what it was, tumbling down, almost crushing a few horses. And the horse with rainbow fro just scaled a pole and caused it to fall over. Seriously? Lighting flashed throughout the sky and a loud booming voice shouted, "Be still." Princess, remember his hand shout up to where his ear is under his helmet. Wait a second. Yes, he remembers that voice. Ah ha ha ho, he remembers that voice clearly. Just in time too, because this was the pony he was actually looking for. Oh yes. His smile stretched far and wide to the point that his face actually began to hurt. No, twilight sparkle. Boomed the princess. We must use the traditional royal Canterlot voice foreign which we're about to say. The horse smiled evilly. Oh, this can't be good, he thought as he began to stand. Since you choose to fear your princess, rather than love her, she said as storm clouds formed overhead, and she took the sky. His head followed her up along with everyone else's. He began to approach the two ponies, and to dishonor her with this insulting celebration. Dishonoring? How is this dishonoring? By the looks of it, this celebration looks like it has nothing to do with her, and we declare that Nightmare Night shall be cancelled forever. Her voice echoed while the lighting flashed. He stopped right under the princess horse, who was still locked in her still-framed pose. Around him he could hear children beginning to cry, just as what she just said finally began to dawn on them. Seconds passed and he stood there, his brows twitching, because they couldn't furrow deeper than they already were, hand clenching and unclenching into a fist. Despite his hatred he developed for this pathetic species a while back, and the fact that he can give two shits about what they do. But this was just stupid, outrageous really. She scared these creatures nearly half to death and throws a temper tantrum about it. And just to try and get her way she cancels one of their holidays. What the hell, man? That's he can't put it to words. But he can say this bitch is going to get what's coming to her. Luna landed back onto the ground, her head hung low and eyes shut. She released a stressful sigh. After 1,000 years of being on the moon, ponies still don't treat her the way she wanted to be treated. For 1,000 years they thought of her as a monster, killer, and a tyrant. Even though in reality she's possibly one of the nicest pawns. Something tapped her on the shoulder. She raised her head. Could this be? Did her bluff really cause these ponies to look at her the oath? Wham! His right fist collided into the horse's right eye, sending her straight into the dirt. Surrounding him the startled screams of ponies who had just witnessed his crime filled his ears. Brining his arm back he cracked his knuckles. Princess or not, she's a bitch. He turned his back to the princess, who laid out cold, and sprawled out on the dirt. Cracking his neck he came face to face with Twilight Sparkle, the pony who drugged him. She was dressed in a strange magician outfit fitted with a fake beard and Gandalf hat. Twilight looked him in the eyes, her face filled with shock and anger. He smiled this pony once and threatening in the sleep. A blast of energy struck him in the chest, sending him 50 yards back, and into a tree. Okay, he stands corrected. She is slightly threatening. He fell onto his knees, pushing himself up. He charged full speed at the unicorn. Before Twilight could react, his hand clasped around her face and threw her into the ground. Bending over he stared into her shrunken fear-filled eyes. Lifting her up off the ground, ponies began to scream in terror. Jamming his left hand to the left he pointed at the tall tree house in the distance. The unicorn muffled something into the palm of his hand. Confused he placed her on the ground and released her. The screams died down. You want me to take you to my home? He nodded his head. Why? He said nothing. Hello, I'm speaking to you. Again nothing. Can you? Whatever, she said as she began to walk towards the treehouse. He smiled evilly as he rubbed his palms together, throwing the prank can of snakes on the counter alongside the transformation book. He placed his finger next to the picture of RD and the having wings spell. Twilight, who was tied up in a chair, glanced down at the book, and then back at him. You want me to give you wings? He nodded his head. Just so you can get payback for a prank one of my friends pulled on you. He nodded his head again. You know, you could have just passed, and I would have been completely okay with just giving you wings right then and there. You didn't have to punch Luna in the face, and then attack me. He smiled at the memory. Fine, just stand back, and I'll cast the spell. He did as he was told. Twilight charged up her horn. After a few seconds he began to feel tingles forming in his back. As the moment passed he felt something forming along his back. Glancing back he frowned. Butterfly wings, fucking seriously. Butterfly what? She couldn't have given him demon wings, better yet bird wings or something. What, you don't like them? I can get rid of them if you want. He shook his head no. Twilight sighed. Well, before you go there's one more spell I need to cast. That's if you want to be able to walk on clouds, that is. He nodded his head once more. Just like before, Twilight's horn lit up, but instead he felt nothing. A bright flash caught him off guard, but he stood still. Looking at Twilight he saw her still sitting there in her chair. There you go, you can walk on clouds now could you please untie me? He swung his hand to the side, completely ignoring her. He made his way out the door, leaving the mare tied to the chair. Seriously. Wow, no consideration for others. With one last flash of her magic the rope fell to the ground and Twilight stood up. Alright, Luna, please don't be too far. Landing on the porch of Rainbow Dash's cloud house, which honestly wasn't that hard for him to find, he took hold of the handle and gently opened the door. The house was dark save for the midnight rays that pierced the cloud layer, casting a light glow. Now he had no idea how the fuck physics work in this house. Either all the objects, such as the couch, the bed, that plate sitting on the island counter are enchanted. Or literally these ponies are just giving Isaac Newton the finger. Well, he couldn't really say anything either, since he fought the minions of hell more than once, but that's a discussion for another time. Right now he needs to focus on revenge. Taking the gag can off his belt, he placed it on the cloud counter. Yeah, fuck you physics. Once the can was in place, he took out a special note, which he placed next to the can with care. Taking a peek behind his back, he looked for a place to hide, a place to wait for his victim to show up. As his eyes drifted across the room, he found the perfect spot. Ah yes, the closet. Once he was in position, he sat down and waited. Now it didn't take long for his victim to arrive. 6 minutes to be exact. And boy, did everything not go so well. When the cyan horse approached the gag can, she frowned. Very funny now, don't you think? I haven't fallen for this before. She shouted out into the air, hoping for that her little prankster would be in earshot. He smiled. Okay, maybe the can trick was a little obvious, but that didn't stop him from going into phase 2. As the bird horse glanced around the room looking for her intruder, he decided to, come out of the closet. On other occasions this would seem completely creepy and horrifying for a tall stranger coming out of your closet right behind you. Yet this seemed to scare Dash beyond ends. Once she heard the door to her closet close shut, she turned and saw that same creature she pranked hours ago, standing at her door, cracking his fists with butterfly wings. She didn't know what to say. Sorry, maybe. Well, that seemed out of the question, since an apology won't be able to save her from the ass whooping she was about to receive. Maybe fly away. No, that can't help her at this distance. Even Tank could catch her before she even got off the ground. Dash sighed. There was only one thing she could do: scream.
That's all, Zipsters! Like and subscribe.